All right, next fundamental technique, and probably the last we're going to cover before we get into some actual scripts and dialogues and things like that, is going to be a conversation hook. And man, this is no prospecting is any good without good conversation hooks. So the thing is up to this point in our conversation, we're building rapport, we're presenting our services, we're doing things, but we really haven't engaged the person that we're talking to in that conversation. So the art of engaging them in the conversation is getting them to open up and talk. And there's no better way to get them to open up and talk than to ask strategic, perfectly placed questions. Okay. And so the simple fact is a conversation hook is simply a question, very simply, a question that causes them to open up. So it causes them to say something other than yes, no. So a few lessons ago, we talked about a conversation gate. A conversation gate is not a conversation hook because it's not really getting them to open up. It's more of a yes no question. Could I take a second to tell you what this is about? Yes. Okay. It's not a conversation hook because they're not opening up. A conversation hook is a question that gets them to start giving you some feedback, getting them to share information, to tell you their story, to give information that we need. Okay. So that's a conversation hook. It's a question that gets them to open up. Normally, the first time you use it is after you've given your unique selling proposition. So you can use a conversation hook throughout the entire call, but normally the first time is when you've given your unique selling proposition. And now you've presented your service. It's time to get them to open up. So there's three types of conversation hooks that we are going to go over. We aren't going to go crazy deep on these because we're going to go deep, deep, deep on these in future lessons. But the first type of conversation hook is what I call a positive conversation hook, a positive conversation hook. And what that means is you get the prospect, you assume with your question that the prospect wants to give you good feedback, a positive response. So if I'm prospecting and I say, hey, I'm calling about 123 Main Street. We're selling a lot of houses in the area. Have you ever considered selling? Have you ever considered selling would be the positive conversation hook. And it's taking the assumption that they're going to say, yes, I've been thinking about selling. We're tired of this house. And they start saying yes. Okay. So when you are fairly certain that the question you're going to ask is going to cause them to cooperate with you, you should use a positive conversation hook. It's just the assumption that they're going to cooperate, that they're not going to resist you. Okay. Now, a negative conversation hook is the next type of conversation hook. And I want you to go all the way back in your mind to where we talked about building rapport, how we want to turn no, I don't need that into yes, I don't need that because it takes the venom out of their rejection, their resistance. So a negative conversation hook is if you think that what you've just offered is going to be resisted. Okay. What you've just offered is going to be resisted. So if I am probate prospecting, I typically offer a turnkey service. So, hey, I help with everything that you need during probate. Do you have everything handled? So now instead of, no, I don't need your service, they say, yes, I have everything handled. So I've given a negative conversation hook because I think that they're going to reject or resist what I've just offered. And I want it to be a, yes, it's covered. I don't need you. Instead of a, no, it's covered. I don't need you. Okay, now another benefit of a negative conversation hook is sometimes they feel no pressure at all. You've given a negative and it makes them feel like completely no pressure. There's no reason to resist you. And they might go, actually, you're wrong. I do need help, which is a great objective, a great thing that can happen when you use a negative conversation hook. So, to summarize these, positive, when you use positive, you need to be relatively you need to know that the odds are they're going to start cooperating with you. They're going to answer you positively. They're going to want to work with you. They're going to want to take advantage of what you've maybe mentioned before the question. If you're using a negative, you use that in a place where maybe You think that they're more likely to say no or reject what you've offered. So you turn it into a yes, I don't need that versus a no, I don't need that. That's a negative. And then the third type of conversation hook, and this is where you guys are going to develop your skills a lot in the future, is what we call a binary conversation hook. And this is where we give people two options. Two options. We give them a positive and a negative. So I might say, do you have everything handled? Or is there anything that I could help with? So two options. Now, there's about 1,000 options that they have, but what we do with the binary is we limit it to two choices and we get them to choose one of the two. That way we are in control of the call. When you can start to develop a habit of asking binary questions instead of positive or negative alone, your conversations are going to go much further. You're going to build more rapport. You're going to be able to take it almost wherever you want because you're going to be prepared for whichever choice they pick. Okay. So that's a binary conversation hook. In the beginning, we're going to focus on positives and negatives. And as we get more and more advanced with our prospecting, we're going to start to incorporate binary conversation hooks into our calls to the point where you're probably going to use a binary hook 80 to 90% of the time when you're asking questions in the future. Let's start with positive or negative. If you're already really good at positive and negative, start with binary now. But if you're not, start with positive or negative. We are going to move on to the next session. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate you guys being here. Let's go to our actual prospect types of prospecting calls in the next session.